is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. It is Rapper Day on Blackballed, and everyone that knows me knows how excited that makes me feel. Today is a little bit different and a little bit special. And one of the reasons why is because I have been a consumer of this man's music for over 2 decades. There's been some interesting incarnations as the way this man has evolved as an artist, and there's also been some really interesting life experiences that he's put inside his music. He's a lyricist, he's a poet, and his name is Sage Francis. Sage, what is up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
And now I can't hear you at all.
Oh, you can't hear me at all right now?
Press
I think my mic is...
Oh, that's weird. Now I can't hear you.
Oh, well, that is odd. Don't know what to say. What to say about that? Check
it was a wonderful
settings.
Introduction. Now I can't hear you at all.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Show. Yeah.
Check audio settings on the podcast.
Weird. Everything was going great. I heard everything right up until you just introduced me.
We're with Sage Francis. I'm trying to get him to be able to hear me. I'm pretty sure everyone else can hear me. We'll find out in a second. Hold on a second. Do you have headphones? Sorry, everybody. This is a live show, so we're trying to figure out why it is that he can't hear me. I'm going to leave and come back. How about now?
Yeah, let me see if I'll put my headphones in, see if that helps.
Okay. So while we wait for Sage Francis, I'm gonna play your video. While we work it out. Okay. I'm going to play Sage Francis' video while we try to figure out what's going on here. This is called The Best of Times. This got me through a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll see if Sage Francis can hear me when we get back.
Sorry, man. Standard audio.
It's been a long and lonely trip, but I'm glad.
Once we get this going, we're going to be.
Got to read a couple books and do some research before I reach my verdict. Never thought that I was perfect. Always thought that I had a purpose. I used to wonder if I'd live to see my.
I think I'm just working off of.
The most difficult thing that I did was recite my own words at a service, realizing the person I was addressing probably wasn't looking down from heaven, or cooking up something in hell's kitchen, trying to listen in or eavesdrop from some other dimension. It was self-serving, just like this is. Conveniently religious, on Easter Sunday and on Christmas, the television went from being a babysitter to a mistress. Technology made it easy for us to stay in touch while keeping a distance, so we just stayed distant and never touched. Now all we do is text too much. I don't remember much from my youth, maybe my memory is repressed, or I just spent too much time wondering if I'd live to have sex. I fell in love for the first time in 4th grade, but I didn't have the courage to talk to her. In 8th grade, I wrote the note and slipped it in somebody else's locker. Considered killing myself because of that. It was a big deal. It was a blown cover. It was over for me. My goose was cooked. Stick a fork in me. The jig is up. Blew my chances. The rest is history. Our future was torn asunder. It became abundantly clear I was only brought here to suffer. At least I didn't include my name. Thankfully, I wrote the whole note in code, and it had 10 layers of Scotch tape safety seal, making it impossible to open. Plus, it was set to self-destruct. Whoever read it probably died laughing. I wonder if they lived long enough to realize what happened. A year later, I came to understand that wasn't love that I was feeling for her. I had someone else to obsess over. I was older, I was very mature. I forged my time signature while practicing my parents' autograph because I was failing math. Disconnected the phone when I thought the teacher would call my home. Checked the mailbox twice a day. At the end of a long dirt road, steamed open a couple envelopes like I was in private detective mode. If you snoop around long enough for something in particular, you're guaranteed to find it. For better or worse, that's how I learned it's best to just keep some things private. It was the best of times. It was the end of times. It was the best of times. It was the end of times. It was the best of times. It was the end of times. Best of times, the end of times. I was always on deck, I was next in line. An only child with a pen and pad, writing a list of things I could never have. Walls in my house were paper thin, every squabble seemed to get deafening. My memory served me correctly and made it a point to avoid and forget some things. Proudly to keep from being embarrassed, never meant to upset or give grief to my parents. Kept my secrets, hidden my talents in my head, never under the mattress. Therapy couldn't break me, never learned a word that would ensure safety, so I spoke softly. And I tiptoed off, and the door to my room was like a big old coffin. The way that it creaked when I closed it shut, anxieties peaked when it opened up, as if everything that I was thinking would be exposed. I still sleep fully clothed. It was the best of times. It was beautiful, it was brutal, it was cruel, it was business as usual, heaven, it was hell. Used to wonder if I lived to see 12. When I did, I figured that I was immortal. Loved to dance but couldn't make it to the formal. Couldn't bear watching my imaginary girlfriend bust a move with any other dudes. Tone Look was talking about a wild thing, but I was still caught up with some child things. Scared of a god who couldn't spare the rod. It was clearly a brimstone and fire thing. Pyromaniac, kleptomaniac, couldn't explain my desire to steal that fire. Now I add it to my rider, like please don't throw me in that patch of briar. It was the best of times. It was the end of times. The school counselor was clueless, cause I never skipped classes. Perfect attendance, imperfect accent, speech impediment they can never really fix. And I fake bad eyesight so I can wear glasses. Consider doing something that would cripple me. Wanted a wheelchair, wanted the sympathy, wanted straight teeth, so then came braces. 4 years of headgear helped me change faces. It was the best of times. It was the end of times. Now I wonder if I live to see marriage. Wonder if I live long enough to have kids. Wonder if I live to see my kids have kids. If I do, I'ma tell them how it is. But don't listen when they tell you that these are your best years. Don't let anyone protect your ears. It's best that you hear what they don't want you to hear. Better to have pressure from peers than not have peers. Bear won't give you chest hair. Spicy food won't make it curl. When you think you got it all figured out and then everything collapses, trust me, kid, it's not the end of the world.
That was Sage Francis with the best of times. Sage, can you hear me, buddy?
I can hear you now.
Yay! Okay, we worked it out. Sage got on the new computer. Welcome to the show, man. Thank you for
Thank you
doing this.
so much. Sorry for that blunderous intro, but yeah.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. There's a price of doing a live show. That used to bother me a lot. Like when I first started doing podcasts, I did a podcast with Noam Chomsky once, and before we went on air, like a second before we went on air, he's like, "This has captions, right?" And I'm like, no, it doesn't have captions. It's a live show. I don't have the AI app yet that like live captions a show. And he's like, because I'm almost blind. And I'm like, okay. Or deaf, he said. And I'm like, okay. Do you still want to do the show? He's like, we'll figure it out. And then I realized it worked perfectly because I would say the question really like with diction and enunciation. And Noam Chomsky he takes 15 minutes to answer a question. So I'm just like, all right. It's all good.
Well, I'll need that as well. Can you yell your questions at me?
Yeah, I sure can. You were born in Miami, but grew up in Rhode Island.
Right.
You're about my age. I'm 47. I just turned 47 actually yesterday. And I'm wondering where you were, if you remember, when you first heard a rap song, and what did it do to you? If anything, like how did you get introduced into the music of hip hop? And you can tell me about that because I'm always interested in origin stories.
Yeah, well, we are very similar in age. So when we were kids, hip hop had a fad phase in pop culture. So it would appear on TV and commercials sporadically. And never taken seriously. It kind of was just like joking around. But there was like the breakdance classes at the YMCA. You don't have that in Canada, but
I think we do.
Do you have YMCA there?
We have YMCA, yeah, and you're right. It was a big trend for a long time. Like, did you grow up with a bunch of white kids who like went through all the incarnations of trends? Like they were skaters for a little while, then they
Yeah,
were
of
break
course.
dancers for a little while.
Yeah, and when we were kids, it was like there really wasn't too much to choose from.
Mhm.
So you were a metalhead, you were a skater, you were a punk, you know. So hip hop in particular is what kind of like drew me in when I first heard it. And I can't say I remember exactly the first hip hop song I heard, but I do remember the early NWA and Fat Boys
Mhm.
tapes circulating um, my social group, particularly when I was at like summer camp, and and I do remember there was a public service announcement on television where this girl was rapping about how you shouldn't smoke cigarettes, and I can remember that because I pinpointed that rap while I was at my aunt's house, and I told her, I was like, hey, I like this stuff, like what is this, I want more of this.
Yeah.
She had no clue what the hell I was talking about, and she was like, "You like this? Like, what are you talking about?" So, so I had to go on a like deep digging mission in order to find any and all things related to rap or hip hop. Um, and thankfully, there was a couple college radio stations in my area where I was able to tune in. It was about 1 hour every week
Yeah.
where they would play rap songs or do like hip hop mixes. And if I was lucky enough to catch them or I was in range, I'd tape them. So I still have a lot of the cassettes from that era. And I was really 8, 9, 10 years old
Hmm.
during this time. I was very, um, I lived in a very isolated area. I was an only child. So I was left to my devices a lot of the time. That's where I spent a lot of my time, um, I guess, obsessing over this thing that I didn't truly understand, but for some reason I really loved. I really wanted to know more and more about it as much as I could. I wanted to include myself. I tried as often as I could, but it was not popping in my area. It was like not, there was no group I could join. There was no mentors who could show me the way. I just had to figure out piece by piece what this thing was until eventually more people became familiar with it and were able to tap me into other resources that would help me like familiarize myself with hip hop.
Yeah, that's interesting actually because if you grew up in did you grow up in the suburbs basically?
Yeah, I mean, not
Yeah.
even the suburbs. It was more rural.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I live in a forest right now as an adult, so
yeah.
I totally
I
feel.
lived in the woods.
The suburbs were interesting because for exactly what you just said, the idea of me and just a few friends in this area that we lived in outside of Toronto, which was this town called Whitby, but there was a ton of kids. There was like 4 high schools in our town of 100,000 people, and there was there were a lot of kids. Hardly any black kids, and hardly any people listening to hip hop. And I didn't realize, and I found it really interesting afterwards when I found out when I started digging into the history of the New York scene and found out that punk and hip hop sort of like they shared spaces and a lot of them became friends with one another. I think Rick Rubin is sort of a conduit between those two scenes and everything, or at the time. It became punk for you to like hip hop as a young white kid in the suburbs. Like it was the rebellious thing to do. Did it feel that way at the time, or was it not? Was it more about for you the creative outlet mostly?
Yeah, it didn't feel like that to me, not at first. And then later on in life, I look back on it and see how it was in New York, and I see the similarities. I see the shared spaces. I see um, just the shared energy of New York City during that time. But um, from the outside looking in, and where we were, um, no, it was very, very, very segregated. Every
Mm.
genre was very segregated. So punk kids and rap kids, or heavy metal kids and rock kids, it was no intermingling. It was like you picked your poison and you stuck with that,
Yeah.
because music was very hard to come by. So I feel like some people would pick the music just to be in a certain social group. I obviously didn't do that because it was not a social group with hip hop where I lived. I wanted to, as a kid, I thought of it as like a 80s movie because we were in the 80s. And I'm like, you know what? There can be a punk rock guy. There can be a rap guy. We can hang out. I like hold a boom box. He has a mohawk. This can all work out real well. I literally remembered thinking that. Like I'll wear the windbreaker. Like that's my character in this group. Like I'll be cool, but it never happened. Like no one liked it. Like people were very adamant about how rap was crap. You know, like that was the saying.
Yeah.
So that made me just kind of dig my heels in even more. And because I knew what I liked. I mean, I wasn't gonna like fake it. I also remember like one of the only non-hip hop tapes I ever bought was Motley Crue, Girls, Girls, Girls. Also a friend from the summer camp I went to, he was like pushing it on me. He was like, "What? You don't like girls, man? You don't like girls?" I was like, "Yeah, I like girls. Okay, I'll get it." I remember
I'll see your Motley Crue and raise you a Beastie Boys, you know?
Oh, well, Beastie Boys, I was that was a bridge actually to the other kids. Again, as you may remember, back then Beastie Boys were probably some of the only hip hop these white kids would listen to.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I heard Fight for Your Right to Party, or I saw the video or something. I was like, this, like, it sounded like rock to me. I really did not like it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not listening to this shit. Fuck this. It's weird. Like MCA looked like my uncle. He was a biker dude. And, you know, I was like, I don't want this. And my mom and stepdad, I think, bought me the Beastie Boys License to Ill tape for a birthday or a holiday. And I remember I just put it away. They were like, "Hey, why don't you listen to some white people for once?" I think they were really concerned that everything I listened to was from a culture they had no understanding of. And at least they kind of like had a understanding of frat culture, you know, like, or dumb white boy culture, like party culture. And obviously at some point I got very bored. There wasn't internet back then. There wasn't much to do. I was like, all right, I'll listen to this Beastie Boys tape. I fucking fell in love with this shit.
Yeah.
Way more than my friends did. I obsessed over the Beastie Boys. And even when Paul's Boutique came out, which I was like fiending for, I could not wait for the next Beastie Boys drop. And that was just way too out there for any of the other kids who liked the first album. And they swore off the Beastie Boys. And I was like, it just enhanced my love and fandom for what they were doing as a group, as a hip hop group, you know, because it was like they matured. It was more hip hop to me.
The music improved exponentially.
Everything about it was better to me. And like everyone else I knew hated it. They were like, this sounds like they're on acid or something, you know? So that was my experience with Beastie Boys. I truly was obsessing over them to the point where I would buy like rag mags. There was those like teeny bopper magazines, and if like the Beastie Boys had like a little picture in a corner of the cover, I'd buy it. Just like anything Beastie Boy related, I'm on it. But
you know, it's funny, I didn't know the Beastie Boys were white for like a year.
Wow.
Because License to Ill, we didn't have MTV, Much Music. We had something called Much Music. I don't recall them playing any of their videos at the time or whatever, but if you remember, the cassette just had that playing on it, and there was no pictures inside of it. And I'm listening to, and at the time I'm listening to, what was that, 1986? I'm listening to like MC Ricky D, aka Slick Rick. I'm listening to like LL Cool J, Run DMC and stuff like that. I just put them in that pile, and I just thought, I didn't even think of their race because I just assumed that they were black. And when I found out they were white, I remember being disappointed. I don't know why. I don't know why I felt that way. But it's funny also, when you said the Fat Boys, I immediately just pictured in my head a cassette with red and yellow typeface.
Yes.
And then I'm just cycling through their songs, and it's like, what did I like about that? Like at the time, I thought they were the dopest thing ever, but I don't think I could listen to them now. You know? Like,
no. That's again, our age. It's so odd how hip hop appealed to us at a certain age because they were making really goofy, immature songs that appeal to people who were that age. Like when we
Fair
were
enough.
8, 9, 10, it was like, yeah, that's goofy and funny and weird. Like,
Wipeout is amazing. Yeah.
yeah. And I did love it. Like, not as much as I liked Run DMC or the Beastie Boys, or like Slick Rick was a whole other level. LL Cool J was a whole other level. So I guess I could start making a different, like, I don't know, I could differentiate between skill level and talent level. But it was all magical to me because I didn't know how any of it was getting made. I didn't really understand how this stuff happens. So even if it was whack, I was down with it. Like the Beat Street soundtrack was whack. Like
Yeah.
like there was 2 good songs on it, maybe.
Have you tried
When I would
listening to
listen it,
Houdini lately?
and Houdini, yeah, that was even back then. It's kind of sounded dated.
Yeah, yeah. I did. There was someone. I was talking to someone about this not too long ago, and about how he's like, where do you think, like, what artist would you credit to sort of get hip hop out of the dated, like, you know, talking about Nazareth, Theo, Tony, and Milton, like Cool Mo D sound or whatever, to like
Yeah.
something else. And the best I could come, Big Daddy Kane and Rakim, I think were like that pavement that went from like whoa 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 to something a little bit more. Okay, this is dope. And now they're timeless. Like if you listen, I can listen to Microphone Fiend right now and nod my head as vigorously as I would have in 1989 or whatever.
Absolutely, like 100%. I think LL Cool J bridged that gap. He helped bridge that gap because he didn't have that, like,
He
I don't know
evolved too with it.
He, ha, who, and me.
Yeah.
It's like LL Cool J just had a better flow.
Yeah.
Even though what I loved about him too was it was goofy, and Rakim's never been goofy. So it was like the Rakim evolution was he stripped all the goofiness from hip hop and was just straight faced, very serious, and like this, like, I ain't no joke, like literally, this is not funny. It's not a joke. I'm not trying to make you laugh. There's no smile in here. It's like, this is my situation. This is my life. This is my art. And so yeah, for me, it went from the older, goofier stuff, which I don't want to downplay it and say that's whack, because like I enjoyed that for what it was. I still do.
It's like eras, right? Like they where they talk about basketball players in certain eras,
Right.
and Larry Bird's shorts. It's not his fault, right?
Larry Bird's a bad man.
He is, but
He's
his
a bad
shorts
motherfucker,
made him
man.
seem a little goofy, right? But I totally feel you. Can I ask you, when you first like put pen to pad and and talk about how listen, I remember I remember doing it and thinking to myself, like, I would think of the flow of a rapper that I liked and then just use my own words instead and try to understand what patterns were. Like it wasn't a natural thing, I think, for a lot of us, right? And I was just wondering, can you give me an idea of chronological pen to pad to when you first maybe like pressed your first mixtape or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost immediately. It was as a kid, and a lot of the rappers we just spoke about, I was emulating their songs. I was writing out their lyrics. I was rehearsing them, recording myself doing those lyrics, those songs. It was like the first album I probably memorized from front to back was Slick Rick.
Yeah.
And
The Ruler's Back, that one, or
yeah. Like Children's Story to this day, like I've forgotten a lot, but like you put on that song, I know every lyric. And Lottie Dottie, obviously.
that was my first song I ever heard in hip hop, was Lottie Dottie.
Oh yeah,
ever.
yeah, man. I got to see Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh perform that live at the Blaze battle in 2000. That Idea, rest in peace. He won that battle, and they were one of the performers on that show. I was like, there's a video of it online or somewhere where you can see me in the front row, like bugging out, like mouthing along. Like, I can't believe I'm seeing this live. Like this mythical song, this mythical collaboration, this mythical moment in hip hop that gave so many people an understanding of what can be done on stage for a live performance. Hip hop does not have a great reputation for live shows. So for that to be as good as it was, a live performance, and then I got to see it live, like a life highlight. Sometimes I forget I even saw that. Because it's so surreal. that such a classic song was performed live in front of me, and I was like right up there in the front row or close to it anyway. But yeah, I was recording those. I was trying to figure out just the way to rap. That I think for me was easy enough. I was a writer by nature, I would say, so I started writing my own raps. Obviously, like stealing a lot of lines from other people and just turning it into my own thing.
Mm.
Um, and I use a lot of those recordings on albums I've released. So you'll hear my like little kid voice pop up intermittently throughout my albums and throughout my catalog. Uh, Especially if it kind of like relates to whatever the song is about. So that's, I mean, I'm running low on that supply. Like there's not too many recordings, but they've
Yeah.
all done their trick, man. I'm really like proud of the fact that I knew it was smart to record myself because I believed in the future there would some sense would be made of it, you know. And I was recording onto a
4-track.
no, not even. I had just a tape recorder.
Oh,
And
pause beats. I love those.
yes, pause beats. That's what. Yeah, totally. I was pretty good at that.
I did that. I did that with Microphone Fiend because it gave you an opportunity at the beginning and the end to to take 4 bars and then just keep on. For those who don't know, we should probably explain what pause beats are. So you had a dual cassette player when you were a kid, and you wanted.
Well,
to,
you
like,
have to explain a dual cassette player.
Yeah, well, if
have
you
to
don't know what a dual
explain
cassette player is, then stop listening to my podcast because I'm 47, right? No, but so you had a cassette player was with no, okay. You had a dual cassette player and you had an album or a cassette in one side that gave you 4 bars of a beat, which is basically emulating where hip hop beats came from because they used to sample the breaks. The break in like funk songs and blues or whatever, and take that and loop it. You'd have to press play, record. As soon as the 4 bars are done, you pause both, you rewind back, you record, and you did that until you had like 3.5 minutes or whatever. It was it was insane how long it would take people to do that shit. Yeah. But that's what that part of it, the ingenuity, the way that you had to get creative to do it. I don't know. I think that assisted people who really wanted to be artists because you know how they say that it's success is like half talent, but also half perseverance. If you're like growing your love for a certain type of music and you're trying to be an artist in that kind of music, and at the same time you have to work so hard and persevere just to make that music. That's where magic comes from. And I think that's where guys like you probably were able to succeed as artists in this scene just because you knew it came out of a passion and a love for it.
Yeah, it's also why a lot of people like me probably fell off and just gave up because it was so hard. And maybe they didn't see the opportunities that I was blessed to have down the line. But I did have to scrape by for a long time and wait for those opportunities to come about. And then when they were there, I had to have the tenacity and skill level to really tackle it to a point where it was worth, like I made it all worth it for everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
Sorry, go ahead.
So the Tascam recordings eventually did happen in 1996. I got my hands on a 4-track and I was recording, like no one was making beats. That was very difficult to find. No one knew how to make beats in my area. A couple, I mean, I would say in 92, which is weird, this guy, DJ Buck, who still DJs on the radio to this day. Nice. He was the first guy to make me an original beat. And I was the weird white kid from out of town who would go to Providence, which was, you know, the capital city of Rhode Island. And I would attend these talent shows and battles. And as a total unknown.
Why is the Italian kid always winning? I'm just kidding. That's a Providence
I'm
joke,
not Italian, but they probably thought I was. I mean, again, one of the only white people in the whole crowd, perhaps the only white person. And a lot of people have the same kind of story who came up during that era if they're white. You really had to prove yourself. It was very easy for people to clown on you, not trust you. So at the time I was doing double time raps and I was like emulating Chip Fu and Twista, Tongue Twista, just showing like supreme skill level so that I wasn't immediately called Vanilla Ice. And
people, can I just interject for a second? People need to understand It was hard enough being a white rapper before Vanilla Ice came out, but after Vanilla Ice came out, it was automatic. Like almost universally after Vanilla Ice came out, if you walked into a house party or something like that, and someone said, "Hey, that guy's a rapper," you would get a very signature, universal, once over look of disbelief and dismissal. It happened all the time,
Yeah,
you know.
it did.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was the only time someone made me a beat, and then I started infiltrating our local college radio station for their well, they had 12-inch vinyl, which would have instrumentals of rap songs and other type things where I would steal them and then record my own raps over them. So that's how I made my first mixtape or demo tape, I would say. It wasn't even a
Yeah.
mixtape, it was like 4 songs. And that was in 1996, where I just was so lost in what to do. I didn't really believe there was a future for me in music, but I still loved it so much. I was supposed to be studying something, trying to get some type of job, and all I could think about was lyrics. All I could think about was putting like my life experience into hip hop, and so that's what I did. And there was no promise for many years. It still looked like right up until 1999. That's only when it started to give me a glimpse that there was a possibility, there was a future in it for me, because the internet happened.
Hmm.
And once the internet became available to everybody all over the world, I think a lot of the people from the outskirts that weren't always considered or welcomed into hip hop were able to find one another and just be creative with one another and
Yeah.
find their own niche audiences. Um, Still trying to go a traditional route, and I'm not saying like we abandoned boom bap or that wasn't our passion, but we, by that time, I think we had been shunned long enough that we were just on our own shit. And there was a great audience out there who was like, I like this other shit too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the internet came out. So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit here, because 9/11 happened in 2001, and Napster was fairly new back then. And exactly 1 month later, on October 11th, 2001, you put out a song called "Makeshift Patriot." And "Makeshift Patriot," I think, if I'm gonna sort of decipher the lyrics, my own, because I actually haven't listened to you talk about this in an interview before, but the it kind of created an identity for you that I don't think was intentional, where people kind of thought that you were a political rapper. But before we get into that, I think that the way that you utilized Napster and didn't run away from it, and kind of like you did a brilliant, like in today's world, Drake always gets credit for the way that he ties in viral marketing schemes with his album and singles releases and stuff like that. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but in hindsight, it was a very, very smart move to put out a song like "Makeshift Patriot" on a countercultural technology that is allowing people to like download things for free. And then a month after the most significant event in all of our lives that happened up until that time. Was there thought put into that, or did the sort of stars just sort of align in that way, and that's what happened?
Partly the stars aligned in that way, just because I wanted this song out immediately. I didn't have distribution. I didn't have any powers behind me. I was not funded by any company or label. And Napster was there, so I was like, I'm putting it on Napster for free. In fact, I said it, I'm going to put it for free for one day, in hopes that it would spread word between everyone, like, yo, download this now. But then they were able to get it everywhere else. I knew that would happen, so
Yeah.
it didn't matter. But I was like, that was, I guess, me thinking I was a marketing genius or whatever, a promotional genius. I'm like,
Pretty
hey,
smart.
we're releasing this for free one day. Come get it. You can't get it anywhere else. But the whole motive behind it really was to, man, get a different point of view out to people who kept hearing the same thing over and over from the media and from their like social surroundings. Because it was driving me crazy. I was like, I'm sure this is driving other people crazy. Let me speak something that they're probably thinking in their head that they would love to hear from someone else, you know.
Mhm.
But also at the same time to make them question. It was for people to question the media, to question what was happening in our government.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it was a grand conspiracy theory song. People can, because I'm not there. I wasn't there to make people say this is exact. I wasn't saying this is what happened. I'm
Right.
like, as far as how 9/11 happened, but I was like, this is curious and this is curious. You're saying this, that's fucked up. This is, like everyone needs to calm down a little bit, take a step back and realize they're being racist as hell. And all the other things I addressed in the song. And it was like a life-changing, country-changing, world-changing event. Nothing's been the same since then. And then we experienced a lot of similar things in a different way with the pandemic, but it's like that changed things. Like a lot of stuff just never will go back to the way that it was.
Yeah, it
Um,
wasn't like was it Most Def and Jadakiss that put out Bush knocked down the towers? Like,
was it Immortal Technique, or
oh,
was that his voice that
that
said?
I think that was his voice. I just looked
Or,
it up,
or
and it says Eminem, Most Def, and Jadakiss. I think Eminem had like one line in it or something
okay,
like
yeah,
that.
there
But
was a couple songs like that. I mean, and I think Makeshift Patriot is not part of that ilk.
no,
I
no,
wasn't
it's not.
there saying that Bush did it. I am saying that the Bushes did train Osama bin Laden, and a lot of other things, but I'm not saying that the point of the song wasn't that we knocked down the buildings. Whatever
What
the
is
hell
it? What
happened
is?
there.
Maybe I should have asked you. What is a makeshift patriot?
Someone who put them at that moment. It was just funny that everyone suddenly needed an American flag to
A
hang from
lapel
their
pin, or
car,
yeah.
and on their lapels. It was like they weren't. That was never a thing. That wasn't their personality up until that moment. All of a sudden, it's like, "Go America, kill Arabs," you know.
Yeah. I'm going to put up not a complete list of the work that you put out. I think it's like a dozen albums, ranging from 2001 to what 20. I guess this list is 2014. The I heard you say in an interview. Let me see if I can get it right. I did write a note for this. That you were trying to understand during the pandemic, especially. I think you were trying to understand your new approach to music. This seems like a repeating iteration for you, to not reinvent yourself, but as you experience personal growth, your artistry kind of changed with you as you changed as you got older. Does that happen organically, or do you have to fight the urge to draw from the way that you used to do things on the mic?
No, it's totally organically. The things that I think, the way words come out of my mouth, the energy that I have, it's like I work with that. I work with that situation and that circumstance. So, people, going back to my first studio release, which was Personal Journals, my sound and style is so different from then. And some people are able to maintain the same style and sound throughout their career. That was never my intention. Um, um, Never an expectation of mine. And I always knew that I would be documenting my life um, as it went, without trying to force anything. It was like, right, it all is based in writing. So if I'm writing something that is true to my moment and to what I believe, or something that really entertains me, then I figure out how to voice it and how my voice works with that. And of course, you have to factor in the beat and what kind of beats are being provided, and I work within that beat, and that vibe and that mood. It's like all these factors are swirling around in the moment to create what you eventually record, and then probably edit to shit the way that I do sometimes. But it's like I couldn't make the same album that I did 3 years ago or 10 years ago. It's just
Yeah.
like So I like to do throwback sounds sometimes to be like, I still got it. Like I can still do that kind of thing,
Yeah.
but there will always be a twist to what I do. Just because I don't have a choice in the matter. It's really just my circumstance, and I work with my circumstance.
If I listen to, say, Makeshift Patriot and then Escape Artist and then The Best of Times, there's, I mean, conceivably you could think that those might be three different artists, right? There's obviously a parallel, there's a Sage Francis cadence that's consistent with all three of them, but the styles are different. And I'm wondering if as you got older, and I think a lot of like, and I was saying off air, I don't like the term white rapper because it just feels like I'm saying something political or something, and I'm not. But it felt like white artists in hip hop almost had not a responsibility, but they tend to gravitate to rhyming over music that wasn't straight up hip hop beats. And for me, the reason why I stopped doing it kind of like that is because I didn't, as I got older, my pants became less baggy and I felt like I wasn't being myself anymore. So I guess my question is, when you rhyme over different styles of music that if you heard it on its own, it wouldn't be considered a hip hop song until you hear someone rap over it. You know, are you, is that something that you do consciously? This might be a repeat of the question I just asked, the organic versus not so much. But I guess my question is that does that make you feel more comfortable and more like yourself, rhyming over stuff that sometimes you can't imagine a rapper on until you hear yourself rhyming over it?
Oh, I do love to do that. um, this it's funny we already talked about this, but this goes back to the days when I was recording stuff off the radio as a kid, just dying for to hear anything I could rap over, anything without vocals. That's where I built those muscles because there wasn't like like radio DJs weren't just throwing on hip hop beats. There would be a rock song or indie rock song with an extended instrumental section of it. If it had drums on it and it was in a certain tempo, I was on it and I was writing to it. I was like,
Yeah.
I was warping myself into that mix and trying to make sense of it. And I like didn't think it was cool. It was just was what it was. It was my like whatever I had at my disposal. So 30 years down the line, I find myself in a situation with the Life album where the Best of Times was on. Um, and I'm working with the punk rock label, and they said, it was my last album with them. They presented the opportunity for me to work with like bands who've never done hip hop stuff before. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I don't know if I'll ever have this opportunity again. I want them to send me demos of music that they think like isn't like they're not trying to do rap stuff. I don't want to hear them try to do hip hop. I want them to give their music to me and I will make it hip hop. Like I will provide the hip hop element to it. And hopefully it all turns into something very unique that like has never been done before and like or I never would have done myself because I'm always looking for the ill hip hop boom bap beats. Honestly, like if I had Premiere by my side, you'd never hear me rapping over a fucking like guitar ever. But he's not by my side, and it forced my hand to find other types of music to rap over. That was unique and exciting and interesting and different. Of course, I would love like man get like LP and fucking DJ Shadow and Premiere in a room and Prince Paul. Like that's what I want.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm going to get. Or it was what I wanted. Like what it eventually turned into this thing where I started working with other people and realizing it drew something different out of me that I didn't know was there. And in retrospect, I look at it and like, damn, like that was unique and it affected people in a way I never predicted. And people related to it. People were drawn to it. Of course, some hip hop kids were like, fuck that. That's not rap. That's not like what I'm used to. So I don't want to hear that shit. It is what it is. I think everything will come full circle. You'll start seeing just like all the popular hip hop acts these days are called emo rap. Like,
Yeah.
they're talking about personal struggles and issues in an open and vulnerable way. Like we did that shit too, over 20 years ago with no recognition, mind you. We cleared the path. We helped like people figure out how it gets done, how it can be done smoothly, authentically, and that's fine with me because like yeah, everything does come full circle. You'll see the cycles of it. You'll see people again. Like I was rapping over stuff that didn't even have drums on it. I got shunned for that by some people, and now it's kind of popular for rappers just to rap over music that has no drums.
I've been seeing that. And it's because I want to segue into Buck 65 because he's a Canadian rapper and you've worked
He's
with him.
the
But
fucking illest. Yeah.
yeah, and we had okay. There's a guy. I don't know if you've ever heard of Classified, another rapper from up here.
Of course.
So Classified, he was on the show, and I went to see him live. I guess it was 4 months ago or something. And he's doing a show where it's just him on stage with like a guitar player and like an MPC or something like that. And it's just that.
That's an awesome combination, by the way.
Yeah,
I love
right?
that setup. Yeah.
And so do I. And I wasn't trying to take anything away from him. What I told him was like, dude, I'm so happy that you're doing this because in my mind it was like finally. Because not for him, but just in general, I think rappers, and I really mean this. I saw Nas do the entire Illmatic album with an orchestra in New York. I think it was 10 years ago or something like that, and it was dope. But the idea, remember MTV used to do Nirvana Unplugged and Alice in Chains Unplugged. I don't understand why that hasn't become extraordinarily popular to see artists who are lyricists, especially, to do unplugged shows with a guy playing an acoustic guitar or a hand drummer or a piano player or something like that.
Yeah. I did that. I did my first huge national tour in 2004 was called the Fuck Clear Channel Tour. Clear Channel eventually became Live Nation.
Right.
We did about 44 shows across the US, and it was me, 2 electric acoustic guitar players, and someone triggering the beats. That was just the drum machine. Mm-hmm. My favorite setup. I love that, and I'm talking to someone right now, trying to figure out how we can do that for another tour of mine. If I do a full tour, that's what I want to do. But sorry to interrupt.
No, please, because first of all, it makes sense economically, because you don't have to drag around all this stuff with you on tour. Second of all, to your point, I am one of those people that you mentioned earlier, live hip hop. It's like 50-50 for me. When I go see a live, I'm not going to name names, but I've gone to shows before with big name artists, and I left really disappointed. Because
almost always.
Exactly. It's just, and I don't know what the reason is. I mean, it's like arenas and hip hop don't really mix.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
Literally don't mix. You can't mix that sound. But this eliminates that, because if you're able to then just sit on a stage in a club of like maybe 400 people max or something like that, and it's a sit down audience, and you got like one of these little mics or even a boom, I've seen guys do that, or they pace on stage and they just have the headset thing and they're rhyming, and you don't hear any of this. You don't hear any like hard B's and P's. It is amazing. And I think a lot of rappers are tentative to do that because you're not rocking the crowd, or you're not, you know what I mean? Like you're not waving their hands and shit. But
right.
Lyrics are so important. Generation X is proving itself to be a viable market for rappers who care about lyrics and want people to hear what they're saying, is basically what I'm saying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, hip hop is so many things. So there's always the room for the rah-rah acts. And this room, they should have made more room for the lyricists to put on a different type of show. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the lyricists felt inadequate on a stage, and it's difficult to perform in front of a live audience and feel like everyone's hearing what you're saying when you're rocking over a beat and you're projecting your voice, and basically feel like you have to yell, and you lose a lot of nuance in your delivery when you do that. I think it takes a very seasoned performer to find the comfortable mindset and set in general to perform it in a way where they can accept that the crowd is enjoying what they're doing, even though it's not like throw your hands in the air type shit,
But you're comfortable doing that. Do you owe some of that to doing slam poetry?
Yeah, I would say that my time in spoken word poetry was a great lesson in how you can thrill an audience without all the extras.
Hmm.
So I started to incorporate that into my hip hop sets where I would start the show off with a spoken word piece, which was
Yeah.
really unheard of back then. And now I think it's kind of common where people will like drop the beat and be like, I'm going to do this one a cappella. It wasn't really heard of back when I was doing it. In fact, well, I never saw anyone do it, but it felt so good. It was like the crowd I know is hearing every word. Um, I'm able to play with my inflection and really not just like syncopate these like and do
You
it
can
all on
pause.
time.
You can
So
pause while
yeah,
they snap their fingers and shit, right? Like
yeah, fuck that. Fuck the snaps and fuck the hisses.
I
But
hated the
like,
snaps.
let's
Yeah.
get it on.
Yeah. So we live in a weird age now. First of all, before I get into that, Buck 65. How did you guys meet? And he's on your label too, isn't he?
He is, yes. Kind of. We did one album with him. We've worked with him a ton.
Mm.
I first met him in 1999. I drove up to Nova Scotia, Halifax, with ADM, and 6'2" was also there. And we recorded a bunch of songs together. We stayed there for a few days. They were, I thought they were part of Anticon. It was kind of a confusing relationship at the time.
Mm.
But what we were recording was something that would be submitted to Anticon, and then Anticon didn't fuck with it. 6'2" ended up putting a lot of, or I think the whole thing on a project called Songs I Hate. It also went on my first mixtape,
Yeah.
Sick of Waiting. And yeah, but I was a huge fan of Bucks. Like Buck 65, I would say, is one of the last hip hop artists who truly inspired me, or even influenced me. I can't like point out many hip hop acts at all outside of my childhood heroes that I can say that influenced what I do. Buck 65 is one of those dudes. The way he approached his music, the way he approached, or the way he would just do non-traditional hip hop songs that would not even need a chorus. You know, like he'd do one verse and then the beat would fade out. And you'd be like, what the fuck? Where's the rest of the song? You're like, where's the chorus, man?
Yeah.
It's like, he said what he needed to say. I was like, you know what? I love that. And you'll see that I went on to do that probably for the rest of my career. Like once I say what needs to be said, if I can't think of like a really interesting way to like build upon that, the song's over. Like it's a 2-minute song. Fuck it.
Yeah, and thank God for the internet in a way, because a lot of people don't realize that one of the big reasons why songs are 3 minutes and are arranged at the way that they're arranged is because of radio play. You gotta fit songs in between ads. That formula of like 16 bars, 4-bar
Yeah.
hook, 16 bars. It was largely because of that. Buck 65. He doesn't know this probably even, but I wrote the his music video treatment for 463.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Good shit.
George Vale directed it. He was a friend of mine.
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
fucking cool video, man.
it is a cool video. George changed it a little bit, but like he kept it pretty much the concept that was pretty dope. It's funny
that
because
was like really cool effects for the time.
oh my God. Well, that's all George. George was like, George Vale, he invented something called liquid light. And he, basically with the old school cameras, he just ripped the shutter off and would put lights like for like the bands like the Tea Party and Danko Jones and stuff like that in their videos. And and he would do still shots like that when the band was playing, or wide shots, sorry. And the light would leak onto the film and create the coolest effect, right? So
Wow.
he was doing shit like that, and that was like 2006, I think, something like that.
Oh, I would say before that.
Was it before that?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. Like 2000. I was trying to think, who was I with at the time? Which girl broke my heart around that time? And it was Nelly. So it was probably around 2003. Something
Yes.
like that. Yeah.
Yes.
So
I've worked with him steadily since then. We've toured together many times. We've toured the States. We've toured Europe together. Um, he obviously went through a lot of crazy stuff in his life. He dipped from the internet. We stayed in touch still. And like he was telling me he's like totally done. He's not going to do anything anymore. And I knew it was kind of bullshit.
He went
If he
through a
listens
lot.
to this, I'm sorry, Rich, but he's one of the most creative people I've ever met. And there's no way someone that creative is going to sit on all these ideas and not explode. So it's like eventually he's coming out with more incredible beats. We started working on a project together in 2017, which nothing's come out yet. I ended up having to, like, a lot of stuff happened to me as well. But we laid down the foundation for something that's going to be pretty incredible. And now that I'm married with children and my life has just like changed so drastically, I'm still trying to figure out how best to approach releasing an album or even recording it. Like it's become very difficult, but I'm gonna work it out. And I get to pick my spots with Buck because he's releasing his own albums now too. Like he's not just doing beats now; he's just like it's pouring out of him. And his last release, super dope, so goddamn good. I gotta get in touch with him for another Strange Famous project today or tomorrow. But I feel bad that like he laid all these really, really incredible beats on me that I haven't done total justice to yet. But I made up for it by having him produce a beat for Chuck D from Public Enemy. Me and Chuck rapping over a $165 beat, which will appear on my next album. So he was very excited about that. It was kind of my like, I'm so happy, like he's happy about that because I know he's probably feeling very frustrated that he did this incredible work that no one has heard yet. That like, I think they're very dope songs, but I have to like rework them in my current circumstance. But yeah,
Chuck D is one of those artists and personalities in hip hop that like he's like literally part of the fabric of the quilt that makes up hip hop culture itself. Like when I was I went to journalism school. I was a writer. I did all that stuff, and I write about politics to this day. And I tell people this story sometimes. Chuck D, the song "Fight the Power" and the movie "Do the Right Thing" wasn't just my introduction into racial politics, but my introduction into what politics were just in general.
Yeah, I can see that.
And
I think it's a similar situation with me.
Yeah. What's it like? Do you if you know him personally or if you've met him or whatever? Tell me the idea of what you had about Chuck D in your mind versus what the real Chuck D might be like. Because I'm expecting a vast difference, and I think that's the right answer, right?
I think his image.
He was like a superhero to us when we were kids.
He's a total superhero.
Yeah.
The angry black man image, just because he was portraying a lot of the messages that needed to be heard from the black community, but like Chuck D is such a kind, gentle, understanding person. A lot of people would call a nerd. Like the guy is a nerd. He nerds out about baseball stuff, drawing and comics, and like he's not the militant, like he's not in your face militant, but the music is, so my interactions with him have been kind of brief, but he's also been so generous with his time and energy when interacting with me whenever that happens, whether it be on Twitter or like in emails. And he's been generous with spreading my music. He's been very like, I don't expect that, like I don't expect my hero to tell his followers that like my stuff is worth checking out or that I'm dope or whatever. Like all of that is so extra, like let me do your laundry, Chuck D. Please let me like.
I need to shine your Pittsburgh Pirate hat, please.
let me sort your like baseball card collection, Chuck D. Let me do these things for you. Don't do stuff for me, but so he's been
A friend of mine just writes a comment saying Chuck loves James, and he's joking. I had a bad few days in 2016 where I was working for Huffington Post, and in Toronto, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter organization in Toronto just said a bunch of really crazy stuff, and so I wrote a piece called "Black Lives Matter co-founder needs to resign." And I don't think Chuck read the article, because if he did, he would have seen, oh, okay, so you're not saying I wasn't trying to insert myself as the white guy trying to tell black people to, but he did sort of imply that I was a racist. And so I had to get Ernie Panicoli, who's like one of the greatest hip hop photographers of all time. He also happens to be a personal friend, to mediate between me and Chuck D. And I was just like, Ernie, can you just tell him I'm not a racist, please? Can you just please tell him that? And then he did. And then so there was a mediation. It felt like a mobster thing, like I was in The Sopranos in like Jersey, and like, Joey Sachs needed to talk or something. But except I'm not, a mafia boss. And Chuck D is in the sense of hip hop world, but do you know how heartbreaking it was to like?
Oh, I can only imagine. Honestly,
He tweets out.
Sorry that happened.
He tweets out 300 years of white supremacy has spawned this, and posted my article, and I'm like, I had your posters on my wall. I got bullied for the Fear of the Black Planet shirt.
Oh man, I had like when we went on a field trip in school, I convinced the bus driver to put on the Fear of a Black Planet right when it came out.
Yeah,
and it's one of my favorite memories, just because my whole class had to listen to this like hip hop album, which was weird. It kind of is weird, like the way it starts off and everything about it. But yeah, but I'm sorry that happened. Chuck D probably like is not able to fully digest all information that comes his way.
I've already forgiven him.
A billion people trying to get in his ear.
Yeah,
I'm one of the very lucky ones where he actually listened to my music and gave it props and like sat with me and chatted with me when he did. But yeah, like I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh, don't worry. No, you know what? It's funny. It's funny. My friend brought it up because he knew that I would talk about it for a second.
It all worked out though.
It worked out. Like, I mean, he probably, if he saw my name, I don't think he would even remember it. Like, and I'm kind of happy about that. To be perfectly honest.
If he called me a racist, if he said anything like that, because I feel you, because if he said that to me, I'd be like, okay, I guess I am. Like Chuck D. Like
I will go home and ponder what you've said and come up with something to. Yeah. No, it was one of those things. But it just, because I've met a bunch of the rappers that I worshipped as a kid, and I met them as adults, and all of them really surprised me with how thankful they seemed about what you talk. I met Guru, for example, in Toronto, like 20. Yeah, yes. Exactly, like 25 years ago or something like that. And it was right when Jazzmatazz came out. And,
wow.
And I was like I feel like you probably were, but I was one of few people who really embraced it.
I did. And I didn't hear anyone talk shit about that record until very recently.
Oh, really?
Like, other people didn't like that record? I was like, yeah.
At the time, and these are people that I respect, were like being like, I don't like the way he phoned it in. They were saying that his lyrics were not as good. And I would try my best to say, like, I think he was trying to be an instrument. Like, you got Bird and Marsalis playing instruments around you. Maybe you don't want to try to like whatever. Anyways,
isn't that kind of his style anyway? Like he wasn't like the phoned in style in general, because that was a part of his delivery. It was, I don't know.
It's mostly the voice.
Style to me.
Yeah, it's mostly the voice, right? But when I gave him props for that, and we talked for like 10 minutes. At the end, it was a TV appearance for Gangstar, and at the end, when we went off air, like literally everybody just swarmed Premiere and left Guru by himself. So I was like, I'm a rapper. I'll just go up to Guru. I don't fucking, this is awesome. And he gave me like 10, 15 minutes of his time, and we talked about Jazzmatazz and this and that. And at the end, I'm always careful to be the guy that leaves first. I never want them to be like, okay, buddy, I got to go now. I hate that shit. So I want to leave first.
That's
right?
you.
Yeah. So I said, listen, man, thank you for your time. And he shook my hand. He brought me in for one of these. And then he kept my hand in his hand. He's like, listen, it's your time too, buddy. And I was just like, fuck, that's a dope thing to say.
Yeah, sweet.
I love it when artists turn out to be just as like kind and kind of like, accessible as you would hope they would be.
It's rare. It's very rare. You catch them at the right time,
I feel like you're like famous among famous people.
Who, me?
in the music industry. I mean, in hip hop. Like I feel like if you asked like 10 rappers who everyone knows what they think of Sage Francis, I think all of them know you.
Yeah, oddly, I'm finding that out. They wouldn't dare say my name in any kind of press statement, but
Because the
yeah, I
press might
mean,
not know who you are, but the rappers do, right?
the rappers do. Yeah, I mean, I have no radio presence. Like I'm not. There's no mainstream element to me. Like my music has appeared in movies, but not enough to the point where it's just general knowledge of like Sage Francis does this. Um, but I think I've done it long enough and I've been innovative enough, and a lot of people have probably like had to reference me for how certain things happened down the line. And like the Grammys mentioning me for the 50th anniversary of hip hop episode,
I
or
didn't
like
catch that.
had my name up on the wall along with a lot of other like people who would never win a Grammy. That was like mind blowing.
Tell me about that. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, at the last Grammys, they did the 50th anniversary of hip hop celebration, where they had like a lot of great MCs and DJs and people like groups come out and perform. And in the background, there was names posted or kind of projected onto a wall that said hip hop, and it like or it was scrolling names, and my name was one of them.
Wow.
And people like took screenshots of it and showed it to me, and I thought they were fucking with me at first on them. And then I found out it actually was like my name up there along with everyone else's. And I was like, wow. And then I found out Questlove was the one who like picked out the names that would appear on the
Really?
wall.
That's that's a fucking story to tell your grandkids.
But it feels like I can't really like they wouldn't care.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's like, oh great, your name was on a wall at the Grammys. Oh, okay. But to
Yeah.
me it was like special validation. It was
Dude,
like wow, like
Questlove was asked to get to put to make a list of rappers to feature on the projection wall for hip hop's 50th birthday, and he chose you among others. Wait, was it like the rappers that hold up the indie scene? Like, what was his
yeah, it
task?
was a lot of it was
Like Immortal
mostly
Technique was up there and shit like that. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So like Atmosphere, but also like what more well-known artists as well. Yeah,
yeah.
I can't
Oh,
even remember right now. All I cared about was Sage Francis. So I was
well,
like, well, what the fuck? And like,
um,
you know, like my family finally was like, oh yes, okay, it's really a thing now. Okay,
before I let you go, I want to ask. I'm a huge Nardwar fan, being a Canadian, right? I think he's
shout out
probably
Nardwar.
shout out
Yes,
to Nardwar. He's probably the best interviewer on the planet, and it's not just because he's silly. I don't know like does he have a Rolodex of relatives of artists that he calls in order to get all this information? Like I don't know how he does it. I have a general idea, but he's the best at it, and he's the only one that does what he does. But he asked you a very interesting question. So I am wondering if you have had the chance to listen to Space Jazz, but composed by L. Ron Hubbard yet.
I did, and in fact, I made beats out of the music that's on it. It's incredibly funky. Like,
Really?
it's not. I wouldn't call it jazz. It's electronic and synthy, and very hip hop. um, I made man. I was doing these things called the Godcast back in the day. Not too far back in the day, but like when we were recording the Epic Beardmen project,
Mm.
that was like 2015 or so. I was going through all my records. I finally came across that one. I was like, yes, I'm going to listen to this. I was like, oh my god, this shit's really dope. But I was like, I don't think I would ever really use it on anything I release officially. But I made mixes for myself and beats for myself that I put over other sound bites, and like I
Yeah.
might release something like that at some point. But yeah,
Imagine trying to clear the sample through Scientology offices. Like,
no, imagine me trying to clear any sample.
fair enough. What do you got going on right now? I know that there's not a new album coming out, but I think you're touring soon. Are you not?
I'm just doing shows. I just started doing shows this year. It was been like over 3 years since I had performed live. Most notably, we just did the Strange Famous Fest, which was a festival I put together in Denver, Colorado. It's free to the public, and it was an incredible venue called the Levitt Pavilion, outdoors, state of the art sound system, LED screens, a ton of artists on the Strange Famous label, and they said they want to do it again next year. So like we're starting a tradition now. That was the very first Strange Famous Fest. We're going to do it next year. We're going to get some Canadians on it next year. Woo. We got Lee Reed, who will be releasing another album on Strange Famous in 2024. So that was I met him when touring Canada, and his live show. Speaking of live hip hop, I was like, this is how the fuck it's done. When I saw him with his DJ, the energy that he brought, I was like, yo, Lee Reed, please work with us. So shout out to him. As for me, I am working on various records. I just did 2 songs on a Meter Maids album coming out in a couple months called Line in the Sky. I did a song with Trademark and Mopes. The album is called Ham and Egger. It's got a ton of really cool features on it. That comes out, I think, next month. And I'm working with our artists on Strange Famous Records until I release my own mixtapes, and maybe I'll do a box set of all the mixtapes that I've done, and like rarities, because I know it's very tough to find now with everything being on streaming services, and I can't put a bulk of my mixtape material on streaming services.
Right.
So I think it'll be cool just to wrap everything up with a big giant box set of like Sage Francis mixtape songs, rarities, remixes, and whatever. Whether it be physical or digital, but it's going to be all in one spot, all in one place. But we got a lot planned. The Personal Journal's 20-year anniversary has been happening, so we've been like releasing different, like a repress of the vinyl. We did an action figure. Wait, let me grab it.
Yeah.
So this action figure sold out.
Right on.
Almost immediately, and so we got like. Lots of like unique items like that we're just using to celebrate that album and for all that it meant for like independent hip hop as well as Strange Famous Records moving forward, and the artists that we now work with, which is building. And I'm very proud of the artists that we have in our circle who are inspiring one another and not expecting to ever get rich off this. So they're just like really going back to the roots of being as creative as possible to impress one another and impress themselves. And we release it and like just keep this fucking thing going. Let's be as creative as possible and have as much fun as possible and speak our truth, and hopefully the crowds will follow.
Well, listen, hip hop, I think, needs stuff like that. Just music and just our society in general, I think, needs stuff like that. Like passion is a better fuel than trying to make hits. And I think that you've done that. That songs that resonate. Oh, you know what I was going to play, or I was going to show you, and I was totally blown away by this when I saw this. It was, I don't know, yesterday or today. I couldn't believe the things that I was seeing from people that were listening to Best of Times. I'm going to have to look it up on YouTube because I can't find the screenshot that I took. But if you look at the comments on your track Best of Time, I'm completely floored. I know you're not supposed to, a lot of people don't read comments. I don't know if you do or not. The very first comment is by a guy named Charlie Coleslaw. This song legitimately stopped me from attempting suicide in 2011. Now, 10 years later, I have 2 beautiful children and life is great. Thank you, Sage. Thank you, Sage. Another one said, I still listen to this every time something significant happens. When I lost my job, I came back here. When I lost my car, I came back here. When I lost it all, I came back here. I found a girlfriend that I envisioned a wonderful future with. I was here. Yesterday, I got a kick-ass job. Finally, I came back here like every time, and I was moved to tears. That's the kind of stuff that I think as an artist is amazing to listen to. You can't get caught up with it. You got to kind of get on with it. But being able to read that and knowing what artists maybe like yourself, whatever your go-to song was when you were feeling sad, that someone else has put you in that place adjacent to their pain or their joy while they're experiencing it. That's got to mean something.
That's special, yeah, for sure. It does always get balanced out by awful, horrible comments other people make.
Oh, fuck those
I
people.
take the good with the bad, you know. Like, but,
Yeah.
but when people say stuff like that, I just wish them the best, you know. Like we are all going through shit. If my music assisted you in any kind of way, just even as like a gentle tap on the shoulder, like, hey, I've been there too, you know, like it's beautiful. So
Your song Grace made me realize, someone else has dated a narcissist. It's amazing.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, that's right. Sage Francis, thank you very much for joining us today on Blackballed. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you can come
thank
back
you.
soon.
I hope to meet you in person. I definitely plan to make it to Toronto within the next year. So
Okay, well, I'll be there, man. I'll be there. Thank you
right,
so much
brother.
for joining us today.
Reach out whenever you want.
I will, buddy. Thanks, man. Sage Francis. That was a treat for me. I really enjoyed that. He's exactly how I thought he would be, and I'm really fortunate and grateful that I was able to speak with him for an hour because he's one of those dudes. He's I don't have a Mount Rushmore of rappers. I don't do that. I don't think ranking is good for anybody. But there are a few independent artists that have never really left the crate that I listen to on a regular basis, and Sage Francis is one of those guys. Immortal Technique is one of those guys. There's a whole list. So I'd like to thank Sage Francis again for joining me. I have Casual Friday on Friday, and there's 2 interviews that I'm still kind of working on between now and then. You'll be the first to know, and we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.